From the beautiful city of Los Angeles, California, we bring you the Gimme Three podcast.
Welcome, cinephiles, cinema lovers, movie appreciators, and of course, our family and friends to the Gimme Three podcast, a series for cinephiles. We are your hosts. I'm Bella of Stratus, here with Nicholas Ibarra, and we're so excited to have a special guest on our podcast today, introducing my dearest friend and fellow cinephile, Remy Smith. Hi, Remy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm very excited to be joining you guys today. I love this podcast a lot, so it's a huge honor to be the first guest.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we're so excited. And Nick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I am also very excited to have Remy here, our first guest. I told her she's getting a plaque and everything. And in exchange, she's getting a Give Me Three tattoo.
Oh,
yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, on her face. So
right on the forehead.
No one will ever forget. That's awesome. Yeah, we're really excited today because, as our listeners know by now, we're continuing our theme for this month, spotlighting women filmmakers for Women's History Month. And today we're talking about the 1960s French New Wave exceptional and groundbreaking filmmaker, Agnès Varda. Remy and Nick, do you guys remember the first Agnès Varda film you ever watched? Or if not, do you have like a favorite?
The first film I actually ever watched of hers, I think, is her last one, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was made in 2017, and it's called Faces, Places. And it's this documentary style film that she made with another French artist named JR. And they sort of just go around the French countryside and put up these giant photographs on buildings and other structures of just sort of ordinary working class French people that they come into contact with. And it's such a fun movie. It's hilarious. It's touching, and I just can't recommend it enough. I loved that film so much.
I'm going to have to check that one out. I have yet to see that.
I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's crazy. That was like her last movie right before
I know.
she passed.
Yeah, it was, the cool thing about it too is that it was sort of like her going back and almost like poking fun at certain moments in her career. And it's just very interesting. It's a good way to sort of get to know her.
Oh, that sounds awesome. I love like Agnès Varda's humor. I think it's just
she's hilarious.
She's so funny.
She's really funny.
And it's kind of like dry almost. Like you have to like it may not be for everyone, but if you get it, you get it.
Totally. She's so intelligent. So
yeah, exactly. What about you, Nick?
Yeah, my first introduction to Varda was Cleo from 5 to 7, which we are going to talk about later today, which I saw in college when we were talking about the French New Wave. And yeah, I was more blown away by her style at the time. I think I was maybe a little too young and stupid to fully grasp her themes and what she was saying in the film. So it was great and kind of staggering to rewatch it now, because I was like, holy crap. I mean, the visuals are still like, they will make you like audibly gasp or just be like, wowza. But the themes are just so beautiful and so powerful, and so it was kind of like rewatching was kind of like seeing it for the first time, because I had a totally new lens on it.
I love that. Yeah, it's funny. I had the same thing. I watched Cleo from 5 to 7. That was my first Varda movie in college in my French cinema class. So I guess it's the one to show everyone. Which makes sense. Because like you said, the first thing that really, really caught my attention was just like visuals and a style that I had really never seen before. And yeah, it almost takes a few watches, which is really fun. I love that how much like rewatch value this movie has. You kind of can like gain something new from it each time. So definitely excited to talk about that one some more today. So before jumping in to discussing these films, I thought it would be good to give our lovely listeners some background info on Varda. So I learned that Agnès Varda actually initially studied art history and was planning on becoming a museum curator, which I'm sure she would have been amazing at as well. But in the middle of her studies, she discovered her passion for photography. So she quickly switched over to that. And as we can see in many of her films, her background in photography really influenced her approach to filmmaking. She actually once said, "I take photographs or I make films, or I put films in the photos or photos in the films," which I just thought was great. I was like, I can totally see that. So this blending of mediums is 100% clear in her work. And I would argue in most of the films we watched for this episode today, actually.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
She was also known as a pioneer of the French New Wave movement, as we've talked about. And to give you guys some background, this was a new style of filmmaking in France from, I believe it was like the late 1950s to the early 1960s. And French New Wave filmmakers were distinguished by their unconventional or innovative approaches to filmmaking that like typically challenge traditional filmmaking conventions. So it involved techniques like on-location shooting, natural lighting, improvised dialogue, nonlinear narrative structures, and of course, breaking the fourth wall, which is something that I really, really love when it's done right. It really brought just like a sense of spontaneity and experimentation to filmmaking and really focused on existential themes, personal expression, and social commentary, which were all major themes explored in all of Varda's filmography. I think it also makes sense that cinema verite would have become a more prevalent style around the same time as French New Wave. And I mention this because Varda immediately became a master of it. We talked a bit about cinema verite in our February Finds bonus episode, but for those who missed that or are unfamiliar with this style, it's basically a seamless blending of fiction, like a narrative story, and then documentary elements like handheld camera work, minimal editing, non-actors, and real locations. So Varda clearly 100% mastered this style by creating really powerful stories that aim to shed light on overlooked and marginalized lives and stories of people all around the world, really. Varda's feature film debut was La Pointe Courte, which was in 1955, followed by Cleo From 5 to 7, 1962, as well as Vagabond in 1985, which we'll also talk about, along with One Sings, the Other Doesn't in 1977. So basically, we'll talk about a film per decade from the 60s to the 70s in Varda's career, which is pretty cool. But these are just a few of her rich narrative stories. Varda also has a stacked list of documentary films, as Remy pointed out, with Faces Places, along with Black Panthers, The Gleaners and I, The Beaches of Agnès, and Varda by Agnès. Have you guys seen any other more of the documentary films that Varda has done? I have yet to watch any of them, but they're on my list.
I've only seen Faces Places, but I've heard a lot about The Beaches of Agnès. So that one is very high on my list.
Me too.
I have seen The Gleaners and I, and that was really tremendous. It's a documentary, but it as Agnès does, she just kind of blends all different forms of artwork and storytelling into it, and it's about these gleaners. You know, those are the focus of the documentary. But as she's making the film, what she's covering is kind of like affecting her. So she is not afraid to make herself a subject, of the documentary as well. And it kind of like talks about how these gleaners are affecting her psyche and her worldview and stuff. And so it's very introspective and just really special. Special is, I guess, the right word for it. But I recommend that one also. Yeah.
Definitely checking that one out. I think I remember my brother recommending that one to me, so it's definitely on my list. So yeah, as of course, with a long-standing career like this, Varda received numerous awards throughout her career that just really further solidified her as a groundbreaking female filmmaker. She became the first woman to win the honorary Palme d'Or at the 2015 Cannes Film Festival, the oldest person to be nominated for a competitive Oscar with Faces Places for Best Documentary Feature, which I just thought was really cool. She became the first female director to win an honorary Oscar in 2017, and she won the Golden Lion for Vagabond at the Venice Film Festival in 1985. So clearly, Varda was an unstoppable trailblazer in the industry, especially for women, but she was also an incredible activist with her commitment to social justice in all of her work. She paved the way for future filmmakers with her innovative and thought-provoking work that historically and continues to spark important conversations about human rights. As we explore 3 of her films today, you'll see a few common themes, including this discourse around human rights, identity or self-exploration, memory, and the passage of time as well. So without further ado, let's jump into these films.
Yeah, we are starting with Cleo from 5 to 7, Varda's French New Wave masterpiece, released in 1962. And it's about Cleo. And the film opens with Cleo getting a tarot card reading as she awaits these test results. She believes that she may have cancer, which is not good. And the tarot card reading does very little to ease her fears. In fact, it all but confirms it. So she's a total wreck. So for the next 2 hours, Cleo's going to be like awaiting these official test results from the doctor. And until then, she's just like moving through Paris in a like contemplation of herself and her purpose and her mortality, which starts pretty much the minute that she leaves this tarot card reader's apartment. She stops at this mirror downstairs and she says,
Minute, beau papillon. Être laide, c'est ça la mort. Tant que je suis belle, je suis vivante et 10 fois plus que les autres.
Hold on, pretty butterfly. Ugliness is a kind of death. As long as I'm beautiful, I'm more alive than others. She says this to herself in her head. And she says this kind of like as a way of, I think at this moment in the film, she's like trying to calm herself down from this bad news. I should mention that Cleo is kind of like a very successful like pop singer. And so like all through her interactions, we kind of get this idea that she is, and more importantly, others have like kind of taken solace in or used or relied on her beauty. You know, they are using her as like an object of getting from A to B. So as she goes from scene to scene, most of this film, which takes place in real time, she's got from 5 to 7. In fact, it's right in the title. People say they're confused by this film. I say, my God, it's in the title. It's Cleo from 5 to 7.
It's really not that complicated.
It's not. So she's got this immense weight of cancer and mortality hanging over her head. And anywhere she goes back to these mirrors as a way of like reminding herself who she is. But the more mirrors that she finds, the more lost she feels. And we meet all these kind of fun characters. Like she's got her like assistant, she's got her bandmates, her lover, and they all kind of add to Cleo's like superficial life, that she's meant to look a certain way. She's meant to act a certain way. She's meant to go to certain events. But with this news hanging over her head, at a certain point of the film, Cleo says, fuck all this shit. And she takes off her wig. She sheds her angelic white ensemble and she puts on this like stark black dress and she puts on these sunglasses and she goes out onto the town again. And then she starts to like absorb the world around her. She starts looking at the world through new eyes, and through these new eyes, not through a mirror, she begins to rediscover herself. So let's start with you, Remy. Talk to us about Cleo from 5 to 7 and what your reaction was when you first saw this film.
I absolutely love this film. I love the themes and sort of the imagery that Varda uses. You touched on it a little bit with the mirrors, and it's sort of, I see this film as a commentary on the societal expectations of women and what makes a woman valuable. And Cleo, at the start of this film, is very much self-absorbed, and the people around her sort of feed into this because she's the star. And like you said, she's looking into mirrors and trying to sort of reaffirm her beauty and her identity to herself. And at one point in the film, the last mirror we see is this shattered mirror on the ground. And you can just see, her eyeball in it, sort of looking down at it. And then she becomes the observer. And it's interesting because I think Varda sort of touches on this in a lot of her films, and certainly in the other two films that we're going to discuss today. What is it that makes a woman valuable? Is it her beauty? Is it something domestic and maternal? Cleo's struggle, her internal journey and her physical journey through Paris in this film, sort of places her self-image at risk. So she sort of has to rediscover who it is that she is, and this existential dread that she has, and how she fits into this world. And she's grappling with her own mortality. And, in public, she is this self-assured, beautiful, accomplished singer. Yet in private, she's struggling immensely with this insecurity and this doubt and this dread. And I just think the journey that she takes is really beautiful as she comes across these different characters and these different people that sort of open her up to the idea that, we're all interconnected, and, people have their own struggles and their own internal battles. And I think this film is so beautiful. And I really, really enjoy the real-time narrative aspect of this, because I think, it just allows the viewer to enter into her anxiety and her distress. And you sort of are going through this, this journey with her. And it feels very real because it's real time. So it's brilliant. I loved this movie the very first time I saw it.
Yes. I couldn't agree more with like what you said about just feeling so immersed in her world. And just, our actress for Cleo,
Corinne Marchand,
she's just perfect as like this little, initially kind of like a princess brat, but she's also like really charming. And then she goes through this like whole transformation that's like really powerful to watch. And I think a huge part of like feeling immersed in her experience and the film as well lends itself to like the style of the way it was filmed. I think one of the most ingenious aspects of filming this movie is how Varda really did use like real locations and people to her advantage. I love the scenes where she's just walking along the streets of Paris, and everyone on the street is like turning their heads to look at her because, one, she looks like a movie star, and then there's like cameras following her everywhere.
Right.
And some even like look at the camera and smile or like laugh and point it out to their friends. And it's just so cool because the way Varda films and like edits these scenes into the movie makes it still feel so natural. And like envelops us into Cleo's world and even her psyche, because Varda really cleverly uses a lot of these shots of people looking directly at the camera, filming them on the street as kind of like POV shots from Cleo's point of view. And so she's like out on her own walking around the city, and she just feels like, or convinces herself that every single person in the world is watching her. And you like really feel this and see this in the way that people like react to the camera, but in the movie you're like, oh, they're just reacting to her. And God, I just think it's such an amazing aspect of this movie and just works so well.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I think it gives the movie a feel, like an unscripted feel, almost.
Yes.
And I think, that's something Agnès Varda was known for, is this documentary style, non-professional actors, sort of on the fly filmmaking. You can kind of see how it works here, and the camera's handheld, and it's the camera serves as like really just an observer in this film. And I noticed that too. I absolutely love the backdrop of Paris and all these people who were really there and real, and they're not just extras or anything like that. It just makes it feel so real and so human.
Yes, I totally agree.
She does such a great job of like blending moments. Like visually, you have those moments like the ones y'all are talking about where they're out in public. You see people pointing at the camera. There's real life Paris people. And then she has these like very planned out, structured, beautiful, gorgeous like shots of Cleo. And she like blends the two so seamlessly. They never feel like they're never jarring to go from one to the other, but they both feel, they both say so much about the character and the themes of the film. So it's she does such a good job of it. She makes it seem easy, but it's a really difficult thing to accomplish that.
Seriously. Yeah. You make such a good point. And oh my God. Yeah. There's so many, like, aside from all the kind of more like naturalistic vibes of this movie, there's so many like stylish scenes that I'm just obsessed with. Like, I think the first one that comes to my mind is like the rehearsal in her bedroom with the two men. And there's so many just inventive shots that like, I don't know, that like I wouldn't think of. Like there's that one where they're singing a song and the camera's like swaying back and forth like with the music. And like, I don't know, when I was watching it, I was like, you'd never think that this would like work or like look good, but somehow it looks beautiful. And I just don't know how they pull that off. And then there's like that other one where she really uses the space to make it have like a whole other effect. Like Cleo's singing the really sad song. I can't remember the name of it. And the camera just like slowly moves around her and zooms in little by little until it's just a close up of her face. And it moves around so that there's like these black curtains behind her that then become the backdrop. And then she like breaks the fourth wall and is just singing this heartbreaking song with tears streaming down her face. And the black and white contrast is so vivid and beautiful. And it's like she's performing on a stage. And then it like pulls back and we're just back into her room in like this natural space. And I love that simple effect that like completely changes the energy of the film in that moment.
Pretty damn impressive stuff. That shot specifically also like took my breath away rewatching it this time, where it's just like she kind of just like goes into this void and it's like she like separates from the real world. It's almost like we're putting a spotlight on her as like we are going into this sonata. It's really, really sad. I will say I liked all the songs that she sang in this movie. I liked the music in this movie much more than the next movie we're going to talk about.
Yes. It's a lot of fun. It's really beautiful music. One question I had for you guys is like, there's a lot of superstition in this film, which I think is kind of an interesting theme. And I'm not even really, I've watched this movie a couple times now, and I don't know, maybe it's just going completely over my head, but I'm just still not totally sure what it's all about. So I wanted to see what you guys think about it. Like, is it there to serve as just like, my initial thought was like, is it there to serve as just another thing that keeps Cleo unhappy or like afraid of the world around her? Because it does kind of seem like she gets all this superstition from like her extremely superstitious maid. But like we know Cleo's like a child and that she doesn't really make decisions for herself. And she seems to be like just barely learning to think for herself and make up her own mind without the influence of others. But I was just curious what you guys thought about what that is like saying in the movie.
I think that's really an interesting question to think about with this film. I think it maybe serves as, a further reinforcement of a bit of her self-obsession in the beginning, that she takes, all of these things as signs and And she's so convinced that, you know, she has cancer. She's almost the tarot card reading is almost just like a death sentence for her. She hasn't even gotten her results back, you know, and she's convinced that she is dying and that she has cancer. And I think there's one point in the movie where she says something like, I think others look at me, I look at no one but myself. And, you know, that comes across, like Nick was saying, with the mirrors and then the shattered mirror, and then she becomes the observer. So I think as the film progresses, these superstitions almost sort of seem to fall away a bit, or they just become less prominent. And she starts to become the observer instead of the observed. And even if she is still being observed, she's looking back at these people and actually seeing them and not just seeing herself through them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that.
To Remy's point, I kind of read it as she is so lacking in self-confidence or a sense of identity at the beginning of this film. Like, and in a lot of ways, you kind of see why. She is the object of, you know, men's desire, or she's the object of like this music industry. She's the object of society. And so that's kind of like how she, at the beginning of the film, is like viewing herself. Like she, you know, rates herself, or like finds identity in like how she looks. And being the object could also mean being the object to like fate, you know, or superstition. You know, like she's a pawn in that game also, until later in the film, where she starts to, you know, rediscover herself and rediscover her identity, and opens up to this soldier character and tells her, actually, my name is not Cleo. It's what was her name? Florence.
Florence.
You know, like that's who I really am. And it's like then that she starts to be like, okay, maybe I don't need to rate myself as through the eyes of fate or men or music, or I can just be myself and who I am. And I thought it was interesting that you have a soldier character as the person that she kind of like confides in, because, well, A, he was like very charming and romantic, but B, it's like there's another person who is used as an object, you know, like go and fight our wars
to an end.
This was, you know, the 60s, and the Vietnam War was very much, you know, a thing that was prevalent and on everybody's mind. So it is very interesting that she chose a soldier to be the one that Cleo opens up to. And also interesting how, as she goes through this sort of transformative self-discovery and is sort of trying to grapple with her place in the world, once you get to the end, it's almost like the cancer diagnosis, whether it's she just doesn't care as much anymore. She has come to this realization about who she is, and it's
she even
like
says, "I'm happy." She says, "You know, like I don't know why I feel happy."
It's a liberating, you know, journey that she goes through.
Yes, 100%.
What an incredible arc! What an absolutely incredible arc to put a character through in, you know, this runtime of, you know, an hour and a half, which is done in real time. Wow. It's just incredible.
Yeah. I like don't even have words for it. It's so good.
It's a true original.
It stays with you forever too. Like this is easily one of my favorite movies of all time, because it's just one that I keep coming back to. And I'm just like, damn, how did she do that?
Absolutely. Any final thoughts, ladies, before we move on to our second film?
Final thoughts. Well, one thing that I thought was kind of funny that I thought of, Nick, with having us just watched the Before Sunrise trilogy. I felt like that scene of Cleo and the soldier, like having their deep talks on the bus, it seemed so inspired, or like what inspired Before Sunrise, like just their conversations on it. And like, there's even that moment when they're like really, really close together and they're kind of like avoiding eye contact. And it just reminded me of like the record store scene with Jesse and Celine. And I was like, oh my God, I wonder if that's where some of those ideas came from, which is pretty cool. If
not pointedly, subconsciously, I'm sure.
Yeah,
you know, like Varda's work has just kind of like, it changed the game. The French New Wave whole movement changed the game and injected itself into film language. So even if he didn't know he was paying homage to Varda, he was. I mean,
he was.
And he's a smart cat, so I'm sure he knew.
He's definitely seen Cleo from 5 to 7.
Yeah. Remy, any final thoughts from you?
I just love this film so much, and I think it's a must watch. So if you haven't seen it, you should definitely go watch it, because it's a very compelling, beautiful performance, and you get swept up into it, and
yes,
it's a great watch. So one of my favorites.
Cleo from 5 to 7. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Must watch. It's streaming right now on the Criterion Channel and HBO Max. And on the Criterion Channel, they have a whole bunch of bonus features to accompany it. You remember bonus features, ladies?
Wow.
Of course.
Miss those.
Well, get the Criterion Channel and you get bonus features with some of your films also, including they had this great interview with Varda and Madonna on some French talk show.
Wow.
And I clicked on it because I'm actually going to see Madonna tonight.
I was going to say, what are the odds of that?
Yeah.
Cleo and Madonna in one night.
So I clicked on it, and there's they're telling the story of how Madonna, and I'm so glad this didn't happen. Madonna saw this film and was like, okay, I love it. She purchased the rights to it with the intention of remaking it with Varda, I think.
No way.
Wow.
Yeah. So they were going to do an American version of this film. But of course, this was probably the late 80s or early 90s or something. Mm-hmm. And, the American studio system was like, okay, let's see the script. And Varda's like, well, we're going to feel it out, we're not going to write the whole script. Yeah. And they're like, nah, we're not doing that. And then so, they weren't able to get the money, which may have been a blessing in disguise. I don't think this film needs a reboot. So if you are a studio head or, anybody who's, thinking about trying to reboot this or remake this, do yourself and the world a favor and stick your head in a toilet.
Don't touch it.
Yeah. I want to add also, you can watch this movie on Canopy too. I don't know how it works with other libraries in other cities, but if you're in Los Angeles, you can get Canopy for free with your library card. So that's a great place to watch. That's where I watch Faces Places also. So it's a great spot to watch some of these great films.
Yeah, and it's free, right? If you have your library card.
Yep, completely free with the library card. It's a great service.
Our next film is One Sings, the Other Doesn't, Varda's film from 1977. Remy and I actually watched this movie together this week, which was really, really fun because it's such a wonderful film about the power and the importance of female friendship and community. Definitely the perfect film to watch with your longtime bestie.
That's sweet.
Your longtime best friend.
I 100% agree. I 100% agree.
So yeah, to give our listeners some context, One Sings, the Other Doesn't is set against the backdrop of the women's liberation movement in 1970s France, with women's reproductive rights really at the center of it. The film centers on two friends, Pauline, a young aspiring singer, and Suzanne, a young mother of two who is seeking an abortion. The two friends find strength and solidarity in their enduring friendship over the course of 14 years. Regardless of their divergent paths in life, the two stay in touch through postcards as they help each other reflect on their confrontations with societal norms, gender norms, and the pursuit of freedom as a woman during an era marked by oppression and change.
I loved this film. I think it is especially pertinent to our times, in light of everything that has happened recently with Roe v. Wade and the policing of women's bodies and their autonomy and free will, and the friendship between these two women, Apple and Suzanne, who form sort of an unlikely friendship because they come from such different backgrounds and they're at such different stages of their lives when they meet. Suzanne already has two children and is pregnant with a third on accident. And Apple is this, vivacious activist artist who's a little bit younger and I just think it's such a authentic and real look at a female friendship that is so important. And I just love how it really is, underlining this solidarity between women as almost a subversive act in a patriarchal society. And it feels really timeless for that reason, because, across the world, women are still having this struggle today. And in a world that sort of tries to pin women against each other often, it's a really beautiful story of, across distance and time, these two women who continue to be loyal to each other. So I agree. It was really beautiful to watch with you, Bella, because it just really speaks to the power of friendship between women.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
You have a lot of women supporting women in this film, and not just with this friendship, which I thought was really great. And yeah, to your lady's point, like a lesser film would have at some point in the film injected some sort of like friendship drama or interpersonal, jealousy or something like that. And it's just like that. This movie does not do that at all. Like, obviously there is drama and conflict in the film, but most of it comes from external sources and the system and the patriarchy. But they stay true to themselves, even though themselves, or that whatever the proper term is, they're continuing to evolve as people, and as they are changing, they still continue to love each other and support each other, because both of these characters start one way, and by the end of the film turn out to be totally different, and I'm sure continue to be totally different. That's just life. But one thing that we know is that they're going to stick together, and that's really great. It's a great friendship movie.
Yes, certainly. And I also appreciate, I like how it's not hitting you over the head really with it. It's, the men in this film are not necessarily the enemy. Daryush, who's the lover of Apple or Pomme, and gets her pregnant. They're presenting very complex characters here. These men are flawed, of course, as any human is, but it's not that they're bad men or the villain of the story. It's that these women, this relationship between these two women is the compelling aspect of it, and it's the strongest bond that there is in the film. Regardless of the relationships that they're in. And the music is hilarious in this film too.
Yes, the music.
I will say the music was not for me. But like,
really? Why? I'm kidding.
But I will say the thing about the music is, like, a lot of other French New Wave directors did this thing where sometimes they would like have their characters just straight up turn to the camera and just tell you like the theme, or just like literally break the fourth wall and tell you like, in this world this happens, and like
right.
These songs, while I may not like sonically weren't for me, and I won't be like buying the soundtrack. Varda does something that is very impressive here, is because she does that without doing that with these songs. So these songs are kind of like her way of making her, that political stance that a lot of other French New Wave filmmakers would just have their characters turn and kind of like almost pompously recite straight to camera.
It all out.
Right. Yeah.
This is a more creative way of doing it.
Totally.
Definitely.
It's not like a musical, but it's used to further the plot and sort of like express where Apple is in her life and these changes that she's gone through. And something I learned is that Agnès actually wrote all the lyrics to those songs, which
no way
is very funny to think about. So yeah.
Oh, many talents.
Yes, indeed. Multi-talented woman for sure.
Yeah, I love just like the way that, like you guys have both said, the way Varda integrates like these issues and like themes and discourse into her work. Like with this, we have it through music, but then also I love how she does it through just like casual conversation all the time. Like she just lays out her views or just various viewpoints in the characters' conversation. Like they talk about divorce, parenthood, abortion, gender roles, cultural differences. I'm sure there's more that I'm missing, but like it's just so fascinating to watch something that has such a like rich narrative story to it, but also be like, oh, this is like something I never thought about before. Or like, oh, that's an interesting point. Like they're very thought-provoking films that are like also have such fun visuals that you stay like invested in it, which I really love about her work.
Yeah, totally. And I saw too that, you know, some of the footage in this movie too is like archival from real events.
Oh, wow.
Some of the protests and demonstrations were real protests and demonstrations.
Wow.
Which just, you know, adds to the really compelling storytelling here.
Yeah, that's insane.
Very cool.
I wanted to touch real quick, Remy, you're talking about the male characters in this film and how they're not like bad people. And they're not, but it almost feels like they're kind of like, victim is not the right word, obviously, but like they are a product of like the patriarchy as well in a negative way. Like they're brought down by it. And this photographer character is kind of like the perfect symbol of that, because he has all the film opens with Apple going into this dude's studio and she sees all these pictures of these women who like she says, why are these pictures, these such sad women, these pictures?
Yeah.
And he doesn't view them that way. He's like, no, they're not sad. Like I strip them down, you know, so that way they can reveal their true selves. But when he stops being able to do that, which is kind of, you know, like symbolic, and when he stops being able to, you know, break them down consciously or subconsciously, he has no purpose anymore, and he offs himself. So I thought that was kind of like, maybe I don't know if I'm reading into it too much, but I was like, maybe that's Varda's way of like, you know, trying to kill this like archaic mindset of living where, you know, the men just kind of like break women down into being like, you know, like the other main male character in this film was like, okay, well, it started out all romantic and stuff, and now I expect you to like make me dinner every night, you know?
Yeah, now that I've got her, or like, the way that you like perceive, or I guess like understood Jerome's character in that like kind of symbolic way. And I think there's also like two sides to it in a way where it's like, I totally agree with what you're saying. But then I think Varda also does more with it when she like has Apple or Pauline or Palm, whatever. She has like 3 names in this. When he like takes her photo and he's just like, oh no, like it's no good. And she's like, she has a line where she's like, I won't be a victim even for a photo.
Right.
And I really like this because I think it also kind of highlights just like this common trope in like art and movies where it's like men have this urge to like victimize women and then like call it art, or like try to say that this is just life for women and that's what makes it even more artistic. And meanwhile, Pauline or Apple is like, fuck that, dude. Like women's liberation and joy and happiness and empowerment is art, like not our suffering, especially at the hands and like profit of men. And I think that's just such a like subtle, powerful moment in the narrative that takes this trope and like concept of women and just like shatters it through the eyes of Pauline, who's like, do you guys see how like dumb this is? Like this is bullshit.
Right.
And then she like carries out this like ideal through like her of like love and empowerment and joy and happiness through her art and music, and like loving her body through her entire career and life's work. So I just really love like how complex all of the dynamics among the characters are in this movie.
Yeah, I thought that's a very astute observation about Palm and the photographer, and how he just can't really break her down because she is so committed to her autonomy, like, and her liberation and being who she is and not, you know, refusing to be exploited. Yeah, very powerful.
She's a great character. I adored her character through and through. And Suzanne was amazing as well, too.
It's a very touching relationship that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's inspiring. And I also love just like how not only do we have their connection, but this like web of other connections, like to like all different other women and stuff. Like I think Pauline or Poem has like a line where she just says, I was accepted into the family of women. Mm-hmm. And I just really love this line so much because I think it's so empowering. And like, I think it's great to show a female character who like sees women as her allies and friends and like really understands the solidarity and strength and power they have in numbers, like the way they can support each other and simultaneously like make groundbreaking changes in society through this.
Yeah, absolutely. And this complete lack of judgment between them.
Yeah.
No matter really what is going on in their lives, you know, as they write each other these postcards and these letters, they're just loyal to each other and 100% like invested in the other's joy and happiness. And
yeah,
it's a really,
they never try to like change each other.
No, they don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to shout out Suzanne, the character, real quick, because like being raised by a single mom, like there's just like a great journey for this character. What she I'm not going to say what she goes through, but what she accomplishes, you know, like learning to type and like doing all of this stuff as a means to like move herself up while raising two kids and being like an incredible mother.
That's amazing.
You know, like so many single mothers do this. And so I thought it was a lovely nod to the single mothers out there, Varda.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Her story is, I really enjoyed her story because she refuses to settle. It's not, you know, she doesn't need a man. And she raises these kids really beautifully and gives them a really wonderful environment where they can express themselves. And we see her daughter sort of begin to transform into her own woman by the end of the film. And I loved also how the doctor that she works with, he kind of tries to make a move on her, but he's married and she's like, I'm not into that, you know, I'm not gonna,
she's like, I'm not
taking a walk with you. So
right.
I thought that was great.
Yeah. She has integrity.
Yes, definitely. It's amazing to see, like, it's crazy because you could have like two different movies about that follow like each of these women. Like just with how different they are and their lives went. I would watch those two movies individually 100%, but then it's something like completely different and amazing blending the two stories together, even though they're like rarely in the same place together.
Yeah. And then wasn't there also, Bella, did you ever end up watching the like short that went along with this movie?
Oh, yes, I did. 'Cause there's like a scene in when Poem and Daryush go to live in Iran with him and his family. And then there's like a little title card that's like, I can't remember what it says exactly, but it's like
The Pleasures of Love in Iran or something.
Another movie. Yeah. So I found it and it's just like I think like a 6.5 minute short. But it was just really beautiful. It was like a little movie side quest that Varda did where she just put together all these really beautiful, this is where like her photography shines. She just put together like really beautiful cinematography and like shots of the architecture that they were exploring there and had this like poetic voiceover talking about like the sweet harmony between nature and architecture and body and decor and like the beauty of that culture and how it's just like a beautiful location for like lovers. She says like a most titillating place for lovers, even if they're characters in a film, which I thought was pretty funny.
I have to look into that.
And then it just like ends and it's like just this little side quest that she did with these characters while they were filming on location there, I guess. So it was really cute.
Yeah. Any final thoughts on One Sings, the Other Doesn't, Remy?
I just think this film is timeless, and it's a really great one to watch right now as women around the world and in the U.S. are, struggling for liberation and autonomy and free will. And those are themes that are really touched on in this film. And if you haven't seen it, you definitely should.
Yeah, you can stream this film on HBO Max right now, or Canopy as well, which Remy mentioned earlier. And then, of course, you can rent it wherever you rent your movies on demand.
Absolutely. And we are going to take a quick break, my friends. During that break, you're going to hear from PGA producer, Gimme Three podcast producer, and my wife. So she's kind of like the producer of my life also. Sonja Mereu, she is going to hook us up with another film recommendation in our weekly segment, Sonja's Movie Minute. So stick around for that. And our final Varda film that we're going to talk about, Vagabond. More with the Gimme Three podcast after this.
Hello, I'm Sonja, and this is my Movie Minute. We're going to start with a pop quiz today. What do all three log lines have in common? 1. A metal highly resistant to heat and corrosion with strength alloys, often used in medical procedures due to its pronounced biocompatibility. 2. Following a series of unexplained crimes, a father is reunited with the son who's been missing for 10 years. 3. An erotic dancer is impregnated by a Cadillac. I'll give you a moment to think. If your answer was, these are all log lines for the 2021 Cannes Film Festival Palme d'Or winner Titane, then you're correct. Titane is an erotic, suspenseful body horror rooted in family bonds and grief. In many ways, I found it almost incomprehensible, but simultaneously transfixing and ultimately deeply moving. Like a Cronenberg or Lynch film, this one certainly benefits from a second viewing. As one would expect from a film with those three wildly different but all accurate log lines, Titane is a movie that demands to be watched but refuses to be defined. The Cannes jury that awarded Titane the Palme d'Or is clearly a bold and innovative group. It was helmed by Spike Lee and includes Melanie Laurent, Maggie Gyllenhaal, and Song Kang-ho. I highly recommend getting inside Titane's Cadillac and taking the ride.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Gimme Three podcast, a series for cinephiles. And we have been chatting Agnès Varda today, one of the all-time greats. And we have discussed two films thus far, Cleo from 5 to 7, and One Sings, the Other Doesn't. Check both of those out, and we are going to wrap up this episode by talking about an absolute banger, as the kids say, Vagabond. Holy crap. I had not seen this movie before. This is a good one.
Oh, yeah.
So this movie follows Mona, who is a vagabond, a drifter, an unhoused, a bum, whatever phrasing you want to use. She has rejected, quote unquote, life, rejected societal norms, and she is living on the road. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to mention, and this is not really a spoiler because we discover it in the first scene, that she dies. Like the film opens with Mona lying dead in a ditch. And then we go back in time and we observe her final days leading up to this tragic death. And we get to have these little moments with all these kooky characters that she interacts with. And this element of the story is kind of told narratively, and because we know how it ends, it also has like this kind of like mystery element to it. Yeah. But Varda also adds this like brilliant documentary style element to the piece as well, as she does. Yes. And we get these little interview vignettes with these people. And sometimes it seems like they're talking to somebody who's interviewing them. Sometimes they're talking to friends or people who are in the scene, but they're shot in a way that makes it feel like they're being interviewed. And we get their opinions of Mona, this woman that they have encountered. Then what's even more cool is all these characters start, and all these stories that Mona's been interacting with, they start interweaving. Characters from one vignette will reappear in another person's vignette, and we get this pretty ingenious network film on top of this like murder mystery, on top of this like pseudo documentary. It sounds very dense, and it kind of is because Varda's a genius, but the way that she pulls it off is like it's all very watchable. It doesn't feel dense. It's like very watchable, very like pulpy and gripping. And I was just like, I was on the edge of my seat and totally enthralled by this whole thing. So what was your experience like, ladies?
I was worried that it was gonna like go over my head because there was just so much going on. But you're right, like you just feel immediately so connected to it and like invested. And it has brilliant pacing throughout the film as well. Like, there's never really a dull moment. It's never like rushing too fast to make a point. You're just like in it, like flowing through it from beginning to end, and it's incredible. Yeah, I love how we have like Agnès Varda's voiceover in this movie. I think it's her. Yeah, she has such a soft and like mesmerizing voice, and every word spoken is it's just like poetry. And I love how the way she introduces Mona, like she's like, I knew little about her, but it seems to me she came from the sea. And then it like flashes back to the beginning of Mona's story, like where we first meet her. And she's like coming out of the sea naked. But even then we're like perceiving her through other people's eyes in a way, because there's like these two men by the beach and they're talking about how crazy she is for diving in. Like maybe it was a dare, like what could be the reasoning for her to do this?
Right.
And they never once think about the possibility that like she just did it for fun or joy, or like to just like wash off or something like that. Which brings me to like one of the biggest themes in this film that I thought was so interesting, is just like the shock that so many observers had at like seeing a woman living outdoors, as they say, like basically an unsheltered woman, or like a woman who chooses to live outside or on the road. Like it's unheard of for them. I think that's because of like social norms where women were just expected to be married off at some point in their young lives, and then they would never have to worry about anything because their husband would house them as long as they took care of him and the house and their children or whatever. So I thought that was a really interesting like kind of anchor throughout the film, is they'd be like, oh, like that young girl, or oh, she's so young and she's a woman. It was just interesting to see that.
Yeah, I think Mona's character is just one of the most interesting and complex characters I've ever seen. And like you were saying, Bella, just it's jarring to people that this young girl is choosing to live this way. And you never really find out why in this film. Why is it that she is on this constant journey? Why is she constantly on the road? Why is she putting herself through, some of these hardships that she goes through while she's out there? And I think like an hour in, somebody says, girls who wander around like that are quite rare. And it's another way I think of commenting on Mona is this character who does not want to subscribe to the expectations and the roles that are, imposed upon her by society. But even so, being on the road and coming across a lot of these characters who are, often male, she still has to grapple with those expectations because others are putting them on her. And you don't always like her. She's not always pleasant. She doesn't always say or do, the maybe morally right thing, but she is 100% who she is. And, not really taking shit from anybody or taking suggestions from anybody or taking help from anybody.
Right.
So I thought she was just such a fascinating character and one you really couldn't look away from. And even though you know her fate in the end, it's like you're rooting for her in a way. And I just the way that this film was made almost as a documentary, blurring the line between documentary and fiction, is really interesting. And I saw something, I can't remember where I saw it, but something about how she was based on an actual woman that Agnès Varda had come across when she was doing research for this film. So I thought that was really interesting.
Wow. Yeah, I wonder how much of like her attitude or like how much was inspired by that.
Right, yeah.
From what I've read, women going on the road and kind of living this lifestyle was becoming a trend in the mid 80s in France. And
interesting.
And Varda was fascinated by it. So she started picking these ladies up and talking to them. So it's probably a bit of an amalgamation of like a bunch of the people that she talked to, but because it's Varda and she's so curious and has like such a, bombastic personality, I think she always does her research,
Yes.
But I think it's also interesting you were talking about this woman rejecting society and a lot of the male characters kind of judging her for that. And you kind of see there's a lot of the female characters that almost envy her.
Yes.
They like refer to her like, oh, she's free, like she's got this like new freedom. So they're kind of like, oh man, I kind of wish I had the guts to do that. But
who was it? Was it the character's name was Yolande?
Yolande, yeah.
Yeah, she was she came back quite a bit throughout the film. And sort of echoed that about she's free and even my boyfriend doesn't love me, and she envies this lifestyle that she has, and then at the same time at the end she's a little bit cruel to her and almost jealous. So that's very interesting. And also the woman that picks her up who studies the trees,
right?
Yes.
Mademoiselle Landière, I think was the name.
Yes.
I thought that the relationship between them was really interesting because that woman really wanted to help her and really like took to her. And she just wasn't really interested in sticking around.
Yeah. I think like that scene of her when she's like giving her all this stuff like food, money, letting her sleep in her car, all this stuff, like wants to help her in every way, is such a like key aspect of Mona's character, and like also tapping into like feminist themes and like complex characters and stuff like that Varda plays with a lot, like in the way that it's not that Mona like doesn't know how to properly behave or that like she grew up outside of society and like isn't aware of social cues or like basic manners. Like she just actively chooses not to live like this. And I love like in that scene and a lot of the scenes throughout the movie, they show that she never says thank you, like not once. And
I noticed that. Yeah.
It's honestly like kind of shocking.
I didn't notice that, but that's a good point. Yeah.
It's really interesting because it's like, for me, it was like kind of jarring. Like I was like, oh, damn, like that's interesting. Like she's this really kind woman is giving her all these things and she just takes it and walks away and like doesn't say anything. But I really love this aspect about her because I think like as women, a lot of the time, we feel like we have to be so kind and liked by everyone, and like manners and thank you and please and sorry are like our favorite words to show this. And so I think Varda taps into these like expectations of a woman here where it's like you expect her to be so grateful and kind, or even like reject them and be like, no, I can't accept this. But she just takes it, and it's kind of jarring. And I really like that it made me feel this way because I feel like it kind of challenged like my own biases and like societal norms that are like ingrained into my brain. Like I was like, say thank you. And then I was like, well, and not to say I don't think women shouldn't say like please and thank you. Like I think manners are great and I respect that a lot. But for this character, I think it was just a really clever choice because it's so unexpected and like it makes her that much more like mysterious and badass and like intriguing as well.
Yeah, she's like, give me that fucking bottle of champagne. I'll drink it.
Yeah, literally. And she's just
totally,
like, peace.
I totally noticed that too, Bella. I was constantly waiting, like while she was receiving this help from people. Even the farmer or the herder who was like offering her a massive plot of land for her to grow the potatoes that she mentioned. She's not. I was waiting for her to be like, "Oh, this is so kind. Thank you so much." But no, that's not her. And
yeah, she
wasn't like, going to do that. Yeah. It's funny.
And I really liked the effect it had on people too, because it's like, as a viewer, I had that like kind of, like shocked experience, but then you also like share it with the people who are like interacting with her. Like they're like, what the hell is wrong with this girl? Like what's going on with her? And it's like, this is just who she is. Like she knows what she wants. She likes her music and her grass and her bread for grass or her bread for bread. And like, that's who she is. And it's fucking awesome.
Yeah, like Revy said, it's like she's not really a likable character, which makes the film all that much more impressive because you're like following this unlikable character and kind of rooting for her, or just like I just was like kind of fascinated watching her survive, you know? Like we get like little adrenaline rushes or like spurts of joy when she like finds some food or finds some shelter or gets some dick, you know. She's like, all right, good for you, you know. But as the movie goes along, I kind of found it interesting, or I was taken by like, okay, we're watching how she survives, but we also start watching how like other people survive too, you know. And we're not necessarily like, in some cases it seems just as hard or just as unpleasant as, you know, Mona's means of survival. So I thought that was interesting and something that didn't like appear like right in the beginning of the film, but I kind of like started thinking about it towards the middle and end of the film.
I think that also that's a really good point. And it also sort of like is a part of this documentary style filmmaking that she does, because you get the sense that some of these people that she comes across who pick her up or who she stays with, they're playing themselves and they are, you know, non-professional actors. And you wonder how similar these characters are to their actual lives. And, you know, it's very interesting to watch this character interact with these people who are not, you know, professional actors. So I think that's where some of the blurring lines between documentary and fiction come in with this one too, that make it so interesting.
I also noticed, like, I think this was one of the films out of the three that I thought reflected her like photography background the most. Varda's, I mean, just like cinematography wise, like I noticed there was kind of like a constant motif in this film of like the camera sweeps over the action, hovers on it just long enough to capture like the integral moment, and then it pans until it lands on like just a simple random frame in the space before like fading to a new scene. Like there's one where it's like panning from Mona and then lands on just like this really simple tangle of vines and leaves. And yet like the simpleness and subtlety of it is really beautiful, honestly. And I think this is where like Varda's love of photography comes into play. Like she's just capturing these brief little moments. And I love to like think about her observing the space and like planning these final kind of photographic shots where the camera is going to like stop and linger. I think it would just be so amazing to see like her filmmaking process of that.
I thought about that too, Bella. That's the way you described that was very well said.
Oh, thank you.
But I was thinking about that. As I was watching this also, that this movie feels so real and these characters feel so real, and Mona feels like such an authentic, real person that like I would have to remind myself sometimes like, oh, there's a camera, like Agnès Varda is there and like behind the camera
right.
And like, you know, setting some of these shots up. And I just think that's part of the genius, is that you forget that at times when you're watching this, that it's not a real person, that it's not a real story. I mean, it is for many people, but you know, this specific story. yeah, it's just the camera work is incredible.
To accompany this film, there a lot kind of like one sings, the other doesn't. There is a little short film on the Criterion channel that is available about the little old lady in the big house.
I loved to see that.
I loved that scene with them where they're drinking and she's making her laugh. I think that
was like my favorite scene.
Me too.
It's great. She's like talking shit about her nephew.
Yes. Yeah, what's the line? She's like, he comes in and he says, like, what great shape you're in, or something like that. And she just dies laughing. It's so good.
So check that out. It's like a little mini documentary, because I guess Varda did like something else with that person who is, again, not an actress. She did like a little short either film or photo project or something where that old woman was posing nude for her.
Oh, wow.
And then Agnès loved her so much, she's like, hey, can you be in Vagabond? And she was like, okay, I'll do it, but I'm not going to be nude again. And so she's like, all right, cool.
I love that.
So there's like a little mini documentary about just kind of like their relationship. It's like 3 or 4 minutes. And some of the footage is like, Varda even mentions it at the beginning of the documentary that like the film kind of rotted. So it's got like this vinegar syndrome-y effect on the film, but it kind of adds to the story in a way.
It's like the griminess.
Yeah. So anyways.
That's really cool.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, I did not know that. How cool.
I did notice, like, when we were watching all these Varda films, at the beginning of the film, it would always say, like, how it was remastered or, like,
restored,
restored, yeah. And I was just like, damn, this is crazy to think about, like, that process.
And she's been a part of the process for I think of her films. She's been a part of like the restoration and like film to digital process, which has been great because amazing. They are all well done. And the Criterion, whether you buy them on physical media or her work always is kind of like popping up on the Criterion channel. There's just tons of great supplemental material. Because she kind of there's like with the Cleo 5 to 7 also there's a short film that they watch about the guy in his damn sunglasses. That's a real short that Agnès made, so that's also available I think on the
I love that.
So anyways, there's all kinds of amazing work, films, shorts, documentaries, narratives, and everything in between available from Miss Agnès Varda. So please, my friends, let us know what you think of Vagabond. Let us know what you think of One Sings, the Other Doesn't. And let us know what you think of Cleo from 5 to 7. And let us know what your favorite Varda film is. Leave us a comment. Let us know. Remy, how you feeling? We hope you had fun. Did you have fun with us here?
I had so much fun. It was just such a pleasure to be able to do this with you guys today. So I'm very grateful that you guys invited me.
Well, you have an open invite anytime you want to come back, so long as you get that tattoo.
All right. I'll see what I can do about that.
Are you on the Letterboxd, Remy? Do you wish to share this information, your Letterboxd profile?
I am on Letterboxd. My username is Remy Noel. So it's RemyNoellee, 2 E's at the end. So that's where you can find me.
Amazing. You can follow our show on Instagram at Gimme Three Podcast. That's GIMME, spell out 3 podcast, Gimme Three Podcast. Like, subscribe to the Gimme Three Podcast. It really helps us out. Bella, tell them where they can find you on the socials.
Yeah, you guys can find me on Instagram at Portrait of a Cinephile or on Letterboxd at BFstratus, BEFSTRATIS.
And you can find me on Letterboxd with my name, Nicholas Ibarra. Ibarra is with a Y. On Instagram at Nicholas Ibarra, or on Twitter, also known as X, at Nicholas P. Ibarra. And the P stands for palatable. We want to thank you for joining us for the Gimme Three podcast, and we will see you at the movies.